Hello, anatomy and physiology scholars. Welcome to the first lecture video. Today's video is on sort of an introduction to human anatomy and physiology. We're going to be spending plenty of time on A&P over the course of the next 2 semesters. We are going to begin at the beginning, which means we got to understand what we actually mean when we say the word human, what the word anatomy means, and what the word physiology means. That is what we are going to do, folks. So let's start with humans. We're going to learn a little bit about humans. Okay? Humans are, number one, we are animals. That's where we fit into the grand scheme of life. We are animals. There are a lot of animals in this world, right? There are starfish, there are turtles, there are wolverines, there are cute babies. All animals. There are 3 reasons why all of these things are animals. Number 1, we're multicellular. Animals are multicellular. All of these guys and gals are multicellular. Number 2, we are motile. Motile means basically the same as mobile. We move a lot. Number 3, we do not have something in our cells called cell walls. Now, we do have cell membranes that separate the inside and the outside of the cell. More on them later. But we don't have these structures called cell walls. To illustrate why this is kind of cool that we don't have cell walls, I want to point your attention to this picture right here, boxed in red. In this picture, we see some human white blood cells. There's a human white blood cell right there. Human white blood cell there. All these guys are human white blood cells. But then there are also these purple things. The purple things are bacteria. Now, these bacteria have cell walls. Your human white blood cells don't. So, this is really awesome. There are antibiotics, there are drugs that interfere with the production of cell walls, which is going to prevent the bacteria from reproducing, but not harm your beautiful human white blood cells. So, we actually exploit one of these aspects of our animal nature when we're using drugs, medicines. Okay, besides being animals, well, what else are we? We are vertebrates. We are vertebrates because we have a vertebral column that supports our body weight, that protects our spinal cord. If you've gotten to lab number 2, you already know a little bit about that vertebral cavity, don't you? So we are vertebrates, like this fish, this crocodile, this lizard, the hiding bird down there. Not a bird, that's like a shrew. There's the bird. Pretty cool looking bird. All vertebrates, all have vertebral columns for support and for protection. Vertebral column, of course, is made of vertebrae. If you are an adult human who is done with all their growing and fusing, you have basically 26 bones in your vertebral column. Hey, by the way, I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. Later on in this semester, we are going to learn the names of everything on this vertebral column, vertebral bone, this vertebra here. There we go. We're going to learn that thing, 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 and that thing. And there's more on the other side. So, just trying to get you a little excited about what's ahead of us. All right, so humans, you, me, and all these guys, we are animals, we are vertebrates. Okay, what else are we? We're mammals. We are mammals for 3 major reasons. We nurse our young. We make milk or have the capacity to make milk. We have hair. All mammals have hair. Helps keep them warm, serves sensory functions as well. Now, also, we have 3 ear bones. Now, our ear bones are located in our middle ear. I'm going to add the word middle right in there. We have 3 middle ear bones. you might be wondering where your middle ear is. Your middle ear is between your outer and your inner ear. All right, there's the ear that you know and love. Here's the part where you might stick a Q-tip right in there. There's the eardrum right there. If you go beyond the eardrum, so right in this region right here, that is the middle ear. And there are 1, 2, 3 bones. They're tiny. They're smaller than Roosevelt's head here on this dime. The 3 bones are called the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. So we have 3 middle ear bones in each ear. We have hair. We make milk. We nurse our young with mammary glands. Mammals. There's a connection there. All right. Animals, vertebrates, mammals. What else are we? What else are we? Let's see. We're primates. We are primates. We have forward-facing eyes. Good for depth perception. Really good for depth perception. So we can reach out and know how far to reach to grab something. We have a pair of collarbones or clavicles. 2 clavicles. Gives our shoulders more mobility if we would want to swing from tree to tree. And if we're doing so, we need to be able to grab. To grab, we need a thumb that is opposable. Like you can touch your fingertips with your thumb. You can touch your finger pads with your thumb. We have opposable thumbs. So those things make us primates. And we're mammals. And we're vertebrates. And we're animals. And there's more. We are hominids. We're hominids for a few reasons. We walk upright on 2 feet. We are bipedal. If you did lab number 1, you know about our bipedality already. And as bipeds, we have this big hole in our skull, and it's at the base of our skull. So this big hole right here, this big hole is called the foramen magnum, which appropriately translates as big. Magnum is big, and foramen is hole. And it's at the base of our skull. Plus, we have a big ratio of brain size to body size. If you divide the weight of your brain by the weight of your body, humans get a big number. And that makes us smart. That little fish right there has the lowest ratio, so he's not so bright. All right, this ratio, this position of the big hole, the foramen magnum, and our 2-footed upright stance all contribute to make us hominids. All right, with that, we have done some anatomy already. Didn't even know it. We snuck some in as we were looking at the definition of human. Now, the word anatomy, we also have to know what that means. Literally, it means to cut up. Yeah, it does. The ana part means up or apart. The tomi part comes from the word temnin, and that means to cut. So literally, anatomy is to cut apart or cut up. Now, how we're really gonna define it, it is a study of body structure. So human anatomy, we are doing the study of the structure of the human body. All right, that's the anatomy half. What about the physiology half? Physiology literally means talking about nature. I don't know how helpful that is, but physiology is the study of function. I almost said structure, I don't know why. It's the study of function. How things work. How they do what they do. Hey, check it out. We are looking at 3 little tiny bones, the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. So that must be the middle ear. If we were learning how sound waves are conducted by these bones and translated into electrical signals by the nervous system, the how, if we're doing the how, we are doing physiology. Now, you really cannot separate the two. Anatomy and physiology go hand in hand. Anatomy and physiology are always going to work together. Why were those middle ear bones so small? What would happen if they were bigger? Well, think about it. If they were bigger, well, then they would not move in response to sound waves. If the femur was smaller, the femur is your big thigh bone, of course. If it were smaller, it would not support your weight. If your heart were not hollow, it could not fill up with blood and move it around your body. So there is a complementarity between structure and function. Things look the way they look because of what they do. Things do what they do because of how they look. We will always be returning to this idea as we go through A&P1 and A&P2. All right, let's keep flying right along. Stop me if I'm going too fast, okay? So, when we're doing anatomy, which of course is the study of structure, there are some different types of anatomy. Number one, there is gross anatomy. The word gross, from the Latin grossus, which means large or great, is referring to things that are big. In other words, things that we can see with our naked eyeballs. If we're using our naked eyes to look at things and studying their structure, then we are doing gross anatomy. All right, we're going to do a lot of gross anatomy this semester. Yes, we will. It'll be gross always and sometimes. Okay. We also need to look at things without our naked eyes. We need to use a microscope. If we are doing some microscopic anatomy, one type of microscopic anatomy we might be doing is this type called histology. Histology is the study of tissues. Now, that begs the question, what is a tissue? A tissue is a group of cells with similar structure and function. So we got some examples of tissues here. This is a tissue right here. This is from the inside of your cheek. This multi-layered structure, this multi-layered tissue, provides that inside of your cheek with a lot of protection. If you are studying this, you are doing some histology. If we look at the picture on the bottom, let me get my little color palette out of the way. This guy right here, this is part of the pancreas. This is the part of the pancreas that makes insulin. Notice how these cells generally, I can't say generally look pretty similar to one another, and they have similar hormone-producing jobs. So, histology, again, looking at these tissues with the aid of a microscope. All right. What else? We could get even smaller and look at individual cells. If we're looking at individual cells, then we are in the realm of cytology. We're probably using an electron microscope to do cytology. And again, structure is going to match function. The contents of these cells are going to dictate what the cells do. Another study that we have to be aware of is pathology. Pathos literally means suffering. So literally pathology is talking about suffering. It is more practically the study of disease. Now, when you're doing pathology, you could be doing gross pathology, looking at diseased organs with your naked eye. We're actually looking at a transverse section of the heart here. If you did lab number 1, you should know what the word transverse is. If you did lab number 2, sorry about that. If you did lab number 2, you should know that if we slice transversely through the heart, we also slice through the pericardial cavity, the mediastinum, the pleural cavity, the thoracic cavity as well, if we went through like the whole body. Now the arrow is pointing at some dead heart tissue. So why did it die? What killed it? What happened here? Answering those questions would be in the realm of pathology. Now bear in mind, you can join words together. We could talk about the microscopic structure of diseased tissues. That would be histopathology. Or we could do the mechanism of how and why a disease progresses. That would be some pathophysiology. All right. So a lot of different types of study that we have to be aware of. So let's move on to a new big topic. And that big topic is levels of structure. There is a hierarchy to our body's organization. So we, like this dude playing tennis, we start at the level of an organism. The organism is made up of roughly a dozen organ systems, multiple organs with similar jobs and structures. Organ systems, surprise, surprise, are made of organs. Organs are then made of tissues. Tissues are made of cells. Cells contain organelles, and organelles and cells contain molecules, which are made of atoms. And there's whole levels we can go through. And we can study stuff at every single level. We can look at structure and function and how they complement one another. All right. Whoops, there we go. There we are. Let's do some organ systems. Okay, organ system number one, the integumentary system. The integumentary system, think about the skin. The skin is going to protect you from all the nasty external environmental things that can damage you. The skin is also going to regulate your body temperature. Now, of course, deep to the skin, we have the bones and cartilage of the skeletal system, which is going to protect your sensitive organs, protect your brain, your spinal cord, your heart, your lungs, your kidneys, your spleen, etc. The skeletal system is going to support your weight. It's going to store minerals like calcium and phosphorus, and it is going to work with your muscles to allow for movement. So we got the integumentary system, we got the skeletal system. What else? We got the muscular system. Muscular system, about 600 muscles or so. It's going to be very much involved in moving your body and manipulating your environment. The muscular system is also involved in heat generation. The better word for heat generation is thermogenesis. Then over here on your right, we've got the nervous system, the brain, the spinal cord, and many nerves constitute the nervous system. Nervous system is involved in the control of your body, regulating things. It's involved in your consciousness and so much more. If you look through the syllabus, you will realize at this point that these are the systems we're doing this semester. We're doing integumentary, we're doing skeletal, we're doing muscular, and we're doing the nervous system. We're going to spend most of the time, in fact, on the nervous system. Then in A&P2, we'll hit the rest of the systems, including the endocrine system. The endocrine system also involves control, but it's going to be control via chemical messengers in your blood. Those are called hormones. Hormones are chemical messengers in your blood. There are a lot of endocrine organs. Endocrine organs make hormones. That's what they do. The pituitary gland, sitting up here at the base of your brain. Thyroid gland in your neck. Testes or ovaries are all endocrine organs. Even the heart and stomach are endocrine organs. Kidney as well. So notice we have some overlap. There are going to be endocrine organs that are also going to belong to other organ systems. All right, so we're going to hit that in A&P2. And we'll hit the cardiovascular system, which of course transports stuff through your body. Oxygen, CO2, heat, wastes, nutrients, etc. You got the heart, blood vessels, and blood constituting that system. What other systems do we have? We're almost done with these systems. We're just kind of running through them right now. We got the lymphatic/immune system, which protects us from pathogens and returns tissue fluid. Like the fluid you can, like if you just squeeze your hand right now, you squeeze your skin, there's liquid in there, right? That liquid needs to circulate back into your bloodstream. And we're going to do that protection and that recirculation with structures like lymphatic vessels, lymph nodes. So we see a lot of lymphatic vessels, these green lines throughout the body here. Lymph nodes, these tiny little bean-sized spherical things. We'll deal with them in more detail than just calling them spherical things later on. Plus, we got our spleen right there. We got our thymus right there, all involved in the lymphatic and immune functions. Okay, now we got the respiratory system. Notice the respiratory system is entirely superior to the diaphragm. You met the diaphragm in lab number 2 if you've done lab number 2. The respiratory system is all about gas movement and exchange. We got the nasal cavity, the pharynx. Pharynx is a better word for throat, by the way. The larynx, better word for voice box. The trachea, the big tubes, the bronchi, and all the little tubes and everything else within each lung. That's the respiratory system. What else? What else do we have? Well, we got the urinary system, which is going to help us get rid of nitrogenous, nitrogen-containing wastes. The urinary system is also going to help regulate a lot about your body. Blood pressure, blood volume, blood pH, blood electrolyte levels. Electrolytes, of course, are things like sodium, potassium, etc. Notice that all the urinary organs are going to be inferior to the diaphragm. Got some kidneys, the ureters, the urinary bladder, and the urethra, all urinary system organs. And then we got the digestive system, which is going to be involved in moving, smashing, and absorbing food, getting rid of wastes, oral cavity, salivary glands, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, intestines, liver, pancreas, gallbladder, all digestive organs, all covered in A&P number 2. And last but not least, we got the reproductive systems, both male and female. Male repro system, producing sperm and testosterone. We got a lot of organs: the testes, the epididymides, the vas deferences, the prostate, the seminal vesicles, the urethra, and the penis. For the female reproductive system, we got the production of sex cells like oocytes, plus hormones like estrogens and progesterone. And we have organs like the ovaries, the fallopian tubes, the uterus, and the vagina. All right, that was our quick, I get that word quick is in quotes, run through the organ systems, okay? Now, an organ is a discrete structure that's part of an organ system. It's made of multiple tissues. It's got a defined function and location, like, for example, your heart. By the way, if you did lab number 1, you know how this heart was sliced. Okay, let's move on. Organs are made of tissues. We already talked a bit about tissues. Tissues are groups of similar cells with a common function. Remember, if we are studying tissues, we are looking at them with a microscope, and we are doing a field of study called histology. Now, there are 4 basic types of tissues. Don't worry, there's lots of subtypes, including epithelial tissue, connective, muscle, and nervous tissue. Those are all the basic types. Let's do a quick run through those. So epithelial tissue is a covering and lining. It is a covering. So there's epithelial tissues covering this heart here. And if we sliced this heart open, if we do a frontal slice through this heart and look at the inside of the chambers, there's epithelial tissue lining. Pretty much, if something is on the outside of an organ, or if it's lining an internal cavity within an organ, it's probably epithelial tissue. Connective tissue, oftentimes, like the name suggests, connect things. It does a whole host of jobs, though. It supports, it protects, it transports, does even more. Bone, like these femurs here, is a classic connective tissue, doing both support and protection. This is a tendon right here. This is your Achilles tendon. It's going to connect a muscle to your heel bone here. That's connective tissue. Ligaments, which would connect bone to bone, are connective tissue. This is a microscopic view of connective tissue. A little histology there. Look at all the strings. What are strings good for? Connecting things, supporting things. Absolutely. Blood is the weirdest connective tissue of all. Definitely a connective tissue. More on blood when we get to A&P number 2. All right, nervous tissue. Like we said earlier, nervous tissue is all about control, communicating, coordinating, and consciousness, and so many more things. Brain, spinal cord, and all the nerves. There's a tiny nerve cell right there. It's called nervous histology. This is a sheep brain. We'll look at these later on this semester. Do a lot of nervous system, a lot of nervous tissue this semester. Muscle tissue. Muscle tissue is involved in movement, of course, and thermogenesis, which recall from a moment ago, thermogenesis is the production of heat. Now, there are 3 basic types of muscle tissue. There's cardiac muscle tissue in your heart. So in your heart, you got cardiac muscle tissue. The kind of muscle you think about, if you think about your bicep or your tricep, if you make a muscle, that muscle tissue is skeletal muscle. Skeletal. Now, there's also other muscle tissue in hollow organs. It's called smooth muscle. We'll look at all of these later on this semester. So 3 basic types of muscle tissue: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth, all involved in movement, thermogenesis. Okay, what else we got? Those are our tissues, yeah. What about cells? Let's talk about cells for a second. We know we are multicellular. We're animals. We're multicellular organisms. We probably have 40 trillion cells in our body. Cell is a basic structural and functional unit that we have. Every single living thing is made out of cells. Cells are awesome. Cells can do things by themselves and also together. They have both individual activity and collective activity. The whole is often more than the sum of the parts. While there's 40 trillion cells in you, there are only about 200 different types, different varieties of cells. Inside the cell, we are going to have organelles, including the nucleus. Purple guy right there. I think it's great that they colored that nucleus purple, because almost all the time when we look at histology, we are going to see the nucleus be stained purple. Nucleus, of course, is the cell's control center. It controls the production of proteins, contains the DNA. Now, also, another organelle we got to be aware of are these guys right here. These are mitochondria right there. Mitochondria are the cellular power plants. They are going to be where we convert food energy into an energy that is usable by the cell. And that usable energy is called adenosine triphosphate, ATP. You probably know it as ATP. I'm sure you heard of ATP in your general bio class. If not, then who did you take for general biology? All right, another organelle we got to know is the endoplasmic reticulum, this bluish guy right here, which is where we make a lot of proteins and a lot of lipids. Now, different organs will have different organelles depending on their job. Their structure is going to match their function. The more active an organ is, the more active a cell is, the more mitochondria it's going to need. The more proteins a cell makes as part of its job, the more larger endoplasmic reticulum it's going to need. All right. With that, we are so close to being done with levels of structure. We got chemical molecules making up our organelles in our cells, including carbs, which are important for fuel and structure. Every time you're eating sugar, potatoes, you're eating carbs. Body uses them for both fuel and for building things. Proteins, in that delicious steak, your body uses proteins to build things, so for structure. Also for enzymes, so chemical reactions happen. Proteins are important for transport, for muscle contraction, and for so much more. Lipids, delicious lipids, are used for fuel, for support, for signaling. So this is a cow's eye. You can see it's wrapped in fat for support. Your cell membranes have a lot of lipids in them. There are hormones that are going to be made out of lipids, so involved in a lot of different things. Nucleic acids, your DNA, your RNA are made of nucleic acids. Adenosine triphosphate, similar to them, which is the energy currency of the cell. So we got to be aware of all these chemical molecules. Now, obviously, this is not a biochemistry or even a cell biology class, so we're not going to spend a great amount of time on these types of things. All right, excuse me. One more big topic in this lecture video, and that big topic is this idea of homeostasis. Homeostasis is how your body maintains a stable internal environment. Think about it. In order to stay alive, you've got to have the right levels of things in your body. Your blood pressure, your heart rate, your respiratory rate, blood oxygen levels, blood CO2 levels, blood glucose levels, blood sodium levels, blood potassium levels. All need to be at the right level. Your body temperature, your body pH, all need to be at the right level. Maintaining these different variables at their correct level is homeostasis. Think about it. Things around you change all the time, but generally things within you stay the same. Now, that does not mean if we graph something, one of these variables, if we graph blood pressure, it doesn't just make a straight line. Instead, if we graph blood pressure, it is going to fluctuate, but it fluctuates within a narrow acceptable range. So these variables, they are not static, they are in fact dynamic. It is a balancing act. Things go up, they come back down. Things go down, they go back up. Maintaining a stable internal environment is homeostasis. All right, let's keep going. We're almost done. Bear with me. All right, this is our basic diagram of how we maintain homeostasis. Look at down here. We have a little pyramid here. There's a little pyramid. And on that pyramid there says balance. There is a variable. It's in balance, okay? If things change, if there is some sort of stimulus that produces a change in the variable, well, what we're going to have to first do is be aware of that. We have to measure that change. We are always measuring our variables. There are cells always measuring your body temperature, your body's water concentration, your body's pH, your blood pressure, etc. We're always doing that. Now, once something changes and the receptor detects it, we have to send that information about that change to a control center. The usual organ for acting as a control center, and I know you're not surprised by this, is the brain. If it's not the brain, it's probably the spinal cord acting as a control center. So we have a variable. For example, body temperature, blood pressure. If it changes, we measure that change and detect that change with a receptor. Then we send that information to the control center, which is often our brain or our spinal cord. The route that the information takes to go from receptor to control center is called the afferent path. Afferent means carrying towards the control center in this case. And the afferent path is often nervous or endocrine in nature. So either a nervous signal, like an electrical signal in your nervous system, or a hormone, a chemical signal in your blood. Now the control center has to compare the current situation with the desired situation and figure out if action is necessary. If action is necessary, the control center has to talk to an effector. So an organ is going to fix the change. So the control center says to the effector, hey, fix this. So if body temperature went down, the control center would tell an organ, hey, make some heat so we can get that body temperature back up. Now, the pathway from the control center to the effector is called the efferent pathway. Efferent means carrying away. So we're going away from the control center here. And it's usually nervous or endocrine in nature. So this is our basic homeostatic feedback loop. And we maintain variables all the time. And we maintain homeostasis. And we stay alive. All right. So, most of the time, what we're doing when we're doing homeostasis is this thing called negative feedback, where there's a stimulus and our response goes the other direction. Okay? So let's use an example here with your heating system in your house. Okay? If you set the temperature on your thermostat. All right, you say, hey, I want it to be 72 degrees in here. If the temperature drops to 71, all of a sudden, our variable has changed. A receptor will detect that, send a signal to the heater. The heater will turn on, produce heat, and the temperature goes back up. And we go back to that level that we want it. And this is just like homeostasis. We're maintaining an environment. And what we're doing here is called negative feedback, because the stimulus took our variable one way, and then the response fixed it by going the other way. The word negative has this idea of opposite here. So think about it. If you stand up really quickly, your blood pressure is going to drop up in your neck, in your head. Your blood pressure is going to drop. And your body is going to try to fix it, try to bring that blood pressure back up. So blood pressure went down. Our body's response was to bring it back up. That's negative feedback. The response is opposite the initial change. And you might be wondering, how often does this happen? It's happening all the time. You're always doing negative feedback. You're doing negative feedback all over the place, all the time. And you're doing it with the grand goal of maintaining homeostasis. By the way, pretty much anything you do in your body is probably going to help you maintain homeostasis. If you're stuck on a question, just write down maintains homeostasis, because that might be the right answer. Or at least get like a point or something. Anyway, let's look at some examples. Okay, let's talk about body temperature. Let's start on the bottom down here. Body temperature falls. Temperature sensitive cells in your skin, your brain, are going to be the receptors. They're going to measure it. They're going to send that information to your control center. You have this part of your brain called the hypothalamus, which is going to control your temperature and do your thermoregulation. And the receptors send information there to that control center on the afferent path. And then the control center is going to compare the current situation with the desired and say, hey, it is cold. And the control center is going to send information to the effectors, which are in this case are skeletal muscles. They're going to start contracting, shivering, doing thermogenesis, which generates heat. And that pathway between the control center and the effectors is called the efferent pathway. All right, similar situation happens with temperature going up. Receptors measure it, thermoregulatory center, but now this time the effectors are sweat glands, and sweating will help us reduce our body temperature. Same idea. Both negative feedback, because in both cases the response was opposite the initial change. All right, here's another example. You eat some food and your blood sugar levels go up. Pancreas acts as a receptor. Pancreas also acts as the control center. Kind of crazy. And the pancreas then releases hormones. So we have an endocrine efferent path. Hormones that affect lots of cells in your body, muscle cells, liver cells, that absorb the glucose and bring the glucose levels back down. Negative feedback. If glucose levels go down too much, there's a similar pathway that brings glucose levels back up. And there's so many examples of negative feedback. We're going to do negative feedback so many times in A&P1 and A&P2. All right, last topic. I swear, last topic. If there's negative feedback, no surprise, there's positive feedback. Remember, negative feedback is going to be where the response offsets, goes in the opposite direction of the initial change. Positive feedback is where the response increases the original change. So something goes up. Positive feedback makes it go up more and more and more and more and more. Or if something went down, positive feedback makes it go down and down and down and down. Great example is the Ferguson reflex, which happens during childbirth. The baby's head starts to push and stretch the cervix. The cervix stretches. That's our initial stimulus right there, cervix stretching. Nerves are going to take information to the control center of the brain. The pituitary gland secretes a hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin makes the muscle in the uterus contract, squeezing the baby, pushing the head on the cervix, and the cervix stretches even more. So our initial stimulus was cervical stretch. The response, the uterine contraction, caused the cervix to stretch even more, which will then increase this cycle, and it'll be of greater intensity and greater intensity and greater intensity until birth. Now, homeostasis is generally not maintained by positive feedback mechanisms because, as you can tell, positive feedback takes us away. It's almost a runaway, in fact. There has to be some dramatic event like the actual childbirth to end it. So it is not as common as negative feedback. There's only a few examples, in fact. Another example is when you break a blood vessel wall, you attract platelets, it's little tiny blood cells, and they attract more platelets and more platelets and more platelets. So the platelets attract more, which attract even more and more and more and more. And the collection of platelets get bigger and bigger and bigger, helping to seal that break. Positive feedback is often good for things that you want to happen quickly, because you don't want this broken blood vessel to persist, right? You got to fix that and fix it fast. Having platelets attract more, which then attract more and more and more. Well, that does the job. One more example, final one, is the milk ejection reflex. So when baby starts drinking, baby stretches mom's nipple, stimulates the brain to release oxytocin. Hey, same hormone we had for childbirth. Oxytocin causes milk ejection, which causes the baby to drink even more, stretch the nipple even more, and get even more milk, continuing until the baby is full and unlatches. So, 3 examples of positive feedback we had to know: childbirth, blood clotting, and milk ejection. Negative feedback was much more common because it had the much grander goal to maintain homeostasis, which is that dynamic, stable internal environment that keeps you alive. All right, great news, guys. We are done this lecture video. It's kind of a long one on the introduction to anatomy and physiology, which is fantastic. I'm excited. I'm sure you guys are too. and I will see you next time. Bye bye.